I'm going to be talking a little bit about the holistic components about the application. So Jeff did a great job of introducing really what holistic means in the US universities and how we're looking at applications. And what we're really trying to help you understand is that we're looking at the whole person. And so when we're looking through your application, we're trying to understand what type of contribution you'll make to each campus community. So as Jeff said, it's not to count up the hours that you're spending in your extracurriculars, or it's not to see how many, things you mentioned that align with things that, our schools might be looking for. We're not looking for this particular activity or something. It's really to get a sense of who you are. We talk a lot in the committee process at Babson about what type of community member a student will be at Babson. And I think this really speaks for all the colleges in the United States. We're looking for these good human beings who are going to contribute in a unique way to our school and our campus community. So when you might feel like this process is a bit more subjective than you might be hearing about in other programs, as Jeff mentioned, throughout Europe, other types of ways of applying to schools, you might not see something as subjective as the United States process. But it's really just because there are so many schools looking for so many different types of students offering all of these different academic programs. And we think that this sense of fit and making sure the community is something that really matches what you're looking for at the school really helps drive that process with United States applications. So to talk a little bit about establishing that sense of fit with the schools, one of the reasons I'm doing this part of the presentation is because Babson is a very specific place, as you'll hear later on today. We have one major, it's business, and our focus is entrepreneurship. So I wanted to be the one to talk about this topic because I think, maybe even more so than my colleagues here, we are specifically looking for a student with that particular interest. But all of us here on the presentation, and I would say most of the schools in the United States, have this sense of fit that they're looking for in the application process. And it's not as elusive as it sounds so much as, again, just trying to figure out what type of community member you would be at these schools. So at Babson, we always say we're looking for that entrepreneurial spirit. That doesn't mean that you have to have had a particular business experience already, but that you have that passion for creative thinking and problem solving. And that comes through in many different elements of the application. That sense of fit might come through in the extracurriculars that you've chosen. It can come through in your supplemental essay. It can come through in your recommendations as your recommenders are talking about what type of character you have and that type of grit that you show in the classroom, or resilience. And those character traits are really important to us in this process, just like your grades, your scores, and any of these other more objective parts of the application are. So as you think about extracurricular activities, I can't stress enough, this is not us counting the number of hours that you spend outside of the classroom. We also understand that in the United States, the school day and the extracurricular schedule is very different and a little bit more built into the student schedule. So we know that worldwide students and their activities can look quite different. But all we are trying to understand is how you spend your time out of the classroom and what that says about you. So as Jeff said, that could be a part-time job, that could be community service, it could be, the way you spend time with your family, helping take care of a family member. Anything that you're spending your time on is something that shows us a little bit more about who you are, how you decide to spend your time. So that's really what we're looking for in the extracurriculars. We're trying to understand, are you a leader in a certain element of your extracurriculars? Maybe you've taken on a leadership role, you've founded a club at your school, or you're someone that has really spearheaded community service, outreach, and efforts throughout your area. Whatever that might be, it gives us a sense of who you are and what you might do and engage in when you get to our campus communities. To talk a little bit more about those essays, Jeff did a great job of setting this up and talking a little bit about what we're looking for in these essays and then the supplemental ones as well. This is, again, where we can understand a little bit more about who you are. You have a chance in your personal statement to write something that's going to go to probably many different schools, talking about something that only you can tell about yourself. And so usually our best advice to anyone writing your application is, or your essay and your application rather, is this should be something that only you can tell. So even if you feel like you're telling a story that other students might have had a similar experience. Only you have had that particular one. So, bring us into the details. Tell us a little bit more about who you are, whatever this might be. This could be a story about growing up and shows some sort of resilience. This could be, your favorite pastime. This could be your favorite place. Any of these different things that are something that only you can tell us and give us this great indication into your character. And then the supplemental essays are to better understand specifically why you'd be a fit at these schools. So this is really where you can position yourself and say to this particular university, this is why I think I'm a fit for your school. And I think it was a great example that you should be, utilizing students that go to that school or any connections you have to get a better idea of what to write about. You don't necessarily want to just go online and comb through the website, for example, to, pick up on a different course or activity or professor and make sure you name drop that into your essay. This is a chance to say, I understand what your school is about, and I think that this could be a fit for me. So as I mentioned, Babson being entrepreneurial, sometimes students are talking about their first foray into entrepreneurship, like opening up a lemonade stand. Other times, they're talking about social entrepreneurship in the wake of, community service and different crises around the world, what they've been able to do. So those supplemental essays, again, help establish that sense of fit in this holistic process. And then as far as recommendation letters go, they are going to do two things. Your recommendation letters are often going to reinforce or explain things on your transcript to talk about the type of student you are, but they're also going to talk about the type of person you are. So as I mentioned earlier, they might talk about your resilience and grit in the classroom. They might talk about the way that you pursue extra help. They might talk about the way that you offer help to students who are struggling in a class that comes a bit easier to you. Again, these are all things that help us understand you and how you might be at our campus communities. So again, the recommendations letters, I think, serve many different purposes, but among them are to understand that sense of fit as well. Most schools are asking for somewhere around 2 recommendation letters, often one from a counselor and one from an academic teacher that you have. I would always recommend looking at the different websites to better understand what schools are looking for how many recommendations. But generally, you want to have a recommender that understands you well, that you've had an experience with beyond, just participating in their class, but maybe you've had a particular challenge or success in that class and a teacher that can really speak to your ability. And I think that can really help us better understand you as a student beyond the numbers. So that can really be the value of the recommendation letter. And lastly, just to reinforce a little bit about demonstrated interest, I think something that you'll hear in every element of this presentation today is check with each school, because each school will view this differently. Some of the larger schools in the United States might not have the bandwidth to check how many events you've participated in or how you've shown your interest in the school. And other, smaller, more specific institutions might really utilize this sense of demonstrated interest to understand how engaged you've been with the admission office and maybe use that as a measure to understand how much you were interested in this particular school. So demonstrated interest can be anything from tracking your outreach to the admission office. Maybe you've emailed saying that you're really interested and asking a couple of questions. Maybe you've joined a lot of the different virtual activities on campus, to better understand, maybe it's a student panel that you've participated in or some of our virtual information sessions. Maybe you've done interviews. Sometimes that can be very meaningful to the school. It can pretty much always enhance your application, but at the same time, there might be schools that are not measuring those activities at all. So it's always something that you can ask each school how much they value demonstrated interest. But what I would recommend here is if you have a few schools on your list that are truly top of mind and your absolute favorites and places you can really see yourself at, there's no harm in engaging with the admission office. Whether that's through your interview, joining these different virtual offerings. Almost all of our schools right now are trying so hard to engage with students in unique virtual ways, because normally we were able to travel to different areas of the world and meet with you where you are. So this is a great way to be able to better understand the school, maybe at virtual tours, things like that. But demonstrated interest can just be one other way of contributing to this holistic process and showing your sense of fit with the school. So as you think about this holistic process, try not to be overwhelmed that it's totally different at each school and that these things can be more subjective, but think about what each school is looking for as they position themselves on their websites and explain what type of admission process they have. Use these elements to enhance your application, to be able to show all the different things that you've been involved in and all the ways you think you could be a great fit at the different schools you're applying to.